Nearly a year ago I made these linen gym pants because I started training calisthenics and I wanted some pants that were not skin tight, were not made of synthetic fabrics, and I just love linen. I love that it's breathable and it will last decades. I love them so much that I made a second pair. When one of my customers asked if they could add pockets to it, I knew that it was the time for an upgrade. Because to be honest, I've been wanting pockets too. Please feel free to use the chapters to skip around to the part that is relevant to you. Print your pattern at 100% scale. If you're printing on A4 paper, you'll have to cut off the right side and the bottom side of each piece. If you're printing on US letter paper, you'll only have to cut off the right side. Using the grayed out numbers, you can lay out your pattern in the correct order and then attach the pieces one at a time. If you're between sizes, I recommend going larger because larger is better than smaller with these pants. Cut out all the notches and the coloured ones correspond to different sizes. To tailor it to your height, you'll need to measure from the floor to your crotch. If you're doing this measurement yourself, you can just tape it to your foot and measure up to your crotch. I'm 82 centimeters and that's the length of these pants, but all these lines on the bottom of the legs are a centimeter apart. If you're shorter than 82 centimeters, you can cut off the difference from the bottom of the legs. I'm using this beautiful purple linen, and fortunately it's really easy to see the grain line on this because I like to just follow a single thread to cut it perfectly on the grain. Because this edge of the pattern is like two right angles, you can just cut along the grain and then move the pattern piece into place. When you cut exactly on the grain, it's going to be much easier to sew later on, and it's also going to drape much nicer. Mark the notches on your pocket with a fabric marker and draw out 1.5 centimeters from the edge and connect those notches together. Lay the pocket piece on the front piece and sew along that line with a stitch length of 2. Then trim the excess, leaving just a 2mm gap. And carefully clip in the corner right up to the edge, being careful not to go through the stitching. Then turn it the right way out and press. Put your stitch length back to 3 and stitch along the long edge of the pocket opening. This is how it looks now. Fold out the pocket and place another pocket piece on top of it, and we're going to stitch along this edge with an 8mm seam allowance. You can then trim the seam allowance down to 3mm and turn it right side out. Give it a press and sew along the edge with a 7mm seam allowance. And you just French seamed your pocket. Next up, put the back piece on top. Now these are wrong sides together, so the pocket is on the inside. And we're going to sew along that whole edge with an 8mm seam allowance. Trim your seam allowance down to 3mm, flip it out and make sure that the pocket is on the front side and not the back. If you hold it up to the light, you can see that's where the pocket opening is. We want to sew 8mm along the edge and make sure not to catch that pocket opening. When you open it back up again, the front side is the side with the shorter crotch. Press the pocket towards the front with the seam pointing towards the back. And with wrong sides together, we're going to French seam the leg seam. By now you're probably familiar with the recipe. We sew it 8mm from the seam edge, trim it down to a 3mm seam allowance, turn it right side out, give it a little roll and a press, and then sew it with a 7mm seam allowance. Once you've done both legs, place them with the pockets touching each other. With all your layers together in a big sandwich, the top one is the back and the two middle ones are the front. Pin those two front layers together and match up the notches. As you work your way down the seam, you'll get to the crotch seam. To reduce the bulk and for the sake of beauty, point one seam one way and one the other way, matching up the stitching line in the middle. And just continue working your way along that crotch seam so that you pin the back pieces together as well. Then you're going to French seam that all together. 8mm, trim it down to 3mm. Take a moment to admire the beautiful crotch seam that you've just done because The little details do matter. And then roll out that seam, press it flat, and sew it with a 7mm seam allowance. You now have something that looks like a pair of pants. To do the cuffs, we're going to fold up 1 centimeter and fold it towards the wrong side of the fabric. I like to make the seams point towards the back of the pants. Then fold it up another 5 centimeters and press. And pin stitch along that seam, leaving a small opening for the elastic to go into. If you don't want to add elastic to the bottom, you could just sew it the whole way up. Take your waistband piece and French seam along the sides to turn it into a big loop. With right sides together, place the waistband inside the pants, matching up the seam at the center back. You can then stretch it out and match the center front and the sides to distribute the waistband evenly along the pants. And sew them together with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I zigzag stitched along the top of the waistband and along that seam. And then press that seam up towards the waistband and fold the top of the waistband down 1.5 centimeters. If it's all cut on grain, this should be pretty easy because the fabric naturally likes to follow the grain lines. Next, you can fold down your waistband to be sitting about 1/2 centimeter over the seam line from before. And I'm just going along and pinning the whole way around. If you have any tags or care labels, this is a good point to put them in there as well. Now we're going to sew it down, and I like to do it from the front of the pants so I can stitch in the ditch. Because the inside is folded down 1/2 centimeter below this seam line, you will definitely catch the underside. Before you reach the end, leave open a little gap to put the elastic in. Because the waistband is so tall and we want that paper bag waist at the top, you need to do another row of stitching 1.5 centimeters from the top of the waistband. You'll need a piece of elastic the same width as your waist and 2 that are the same width as your ankles. Stitch a piece of scrap fabric to the end of the elastic and fold over the raw edges like this and sew them down. The idea is we're going to butt the elastic pieces up against each other without overlapping so it's not too bulky, and then secure them with the scrap fabric. Alright, you'll need a safety pin on each end of the elastic. Use the front end to wiggle it through the waistband and attach the back end of the elastic to the opening, leaving some extra room so that it doesn't get lost inside the waistband. Once you come out the other side, you can remove the safety pins and attach the other end of elastic to the scrap piece of fabric. Then fold in the loose edges and secure everything until you feel like it's not going to come undone. I like to do like a little box and then a cross through the box. I feel like that's very secure. Oh my gosh, we're almost done! Once the elastic is fully in the waistband, we have this little opening. I like to hand stitch this part closed because this linen is going to last decades. It might even last my whole life, but the elastic will not last as long. So when the elastic gets worn out, or if I change sizes, I only have to undo this hand stitching to replace the elastic and then stitch it back up again. Thank you to Jess for suggesting that I add the pockets. It's because of feedback from people like you that I'm able to improve my patterns, and I really appreciate it. You can check out all of my patterns at sashi.com.au. I would love to see how your pants turned out, so please tag me at House of Sashi on Instagram so that I can share them. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.